general gun laws across the nation?
Well, sure, Raina, that question is a little difficult to answer because it's so broad. There are tens of thousands of firearms laws on the books when you consider local, state, and federal laws. And then, right, so there's tens of thousands of laws impacting people's right to own a firearm.
So what are the gun laws in Minnesota?
Well, Minnesota has its own gun laws that are distinct and separate from the federal government. So in addition to following all of the federal laws, the people of Minnesota have to follow the state laws. And the state of Minnesota requires that anyone who wants to purchase either a handgun or an assault-style rifle has to get a permit to purchase. Not all states require that, but Minnesota requires you to get the permit to purchase, which that permit involves going through a federal background check. And then if you want to carry your firearm, you have to get a separate license called a concealed carry license in Minnesota. And to get that concealed carry license, the state requires that you go through training. And that license is good for 5 years. And then at the end of the 5 years, if you want to renew it, you have to go through training again.
Okay. Now, we require every single person in every state in this country to pass a driving proficiency test before they're issued a license to get behind the wheel. So why not require that future gun owners pass a gun proficiency test before they're issued a license to obtain and shoot a gun?
Sure. Rana, we are asked that question a lot here at the NRA. And the simple answer is driving a car or getting a driver's license is not a constitutional right. The ability to protect yourself with a firearm is a constitutionally guaranteed right. So the same laws and regulations should not apply. There shouldn't be that same sort of test required to exercise a constitutional right that we require of other things that are more privileges within our society. It's a privilege to be able to get a driver's license, but to be able to protect yourself with a firearm is a constitutionally guaranteed right. But again, that said, many states, including Minnesota's, do require that individuals who want to get a concealed carry license, they do have to go through training.
Okay. What are the main issues surrounding gun control today?
Well, I think that the main issue that we're dealing with here at the NRA is Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, has committed, he has an estimated fortune of about $40 billion to imposing gun control laws, like the ones he imposed in New York State and New York City. He wants to bring those to the rest of the country. So we are working very hard to fight him at the state level because he's been going around the federal government. As you've probably seen, the U.S. Congress has been unwilling to pass gun control legislation. And so gun control advocates like Michael Bloomberg are going around Congress and they're going to the state legislatures. So we are very busy right now at every state, in every state, trying to ensure that people's Second Amendment rights are protected. And I think that's our main focus right now is what's going on at the state level.
Okay. Then another issue then that we're debating today, or that's surrounding the U.S. today, is that recently President Obama proposed executive action on gun control. What is the NRA's thoughts on his proposal?
Well, it was clear to us that the president's proposal was more rhetoric than actual substance. As we've had our attorneys and we've had our legal department and research team looking very closely at what he's proposed. And a lot of what he is asking for is just, he's restating what existing law is, or he's calling for greater enforcement of federal gun laws. And we support greater enforcement of gun laws. There's no question about that. We've been calling for that for years. So welcome to the party on that issue, Mr. President. We think it was an attempt to distract away from his failed policies that have failed to keep the American people safe. And we think that his town hall with CNN was more political theater than substantive proposals.
Do you think his proposal goes against the Second Amendment?
Well, I think his proposals are an attempt to distract from his failed record. The American people do not feel safe. As you can see, after the San Bernardino terrorist shooting, concealed carry permits and NICS background checks went up in record numbers across the country. The American people want to be able to protect and defend themselves, and this president's policies have left them feeling defenseless in many cases.
Now, there are 11,000 homicides committed with firearms per year, or about 30 a day. In the last year alone, there have been over 50 school shootings across the nation. If the solution is not to crack down on gun control, how do we keep our nation safe?
Well, I think it's important that people have the ability to defend and protect themselves. And then as for our school children, the NRA has been saying for years that we should protect our children the same way we protect our politicians, our president, even our money that we put in the bank. Our children should have the ability to be protected by armed security in the schools. We have supported legislation that would allow those with proper firearms training to have a license or have a concealed carry permit in the schools.
Should teachers be able to carry and conceal?
Right. If they have the permit and they've gone through training, we think that that could help help the children be safer in the schools. Absolutely.
Another issue that is constantly debated is semi-automatic weapons. Semi-automatic weapons were illegal in the U.S. over 10 years ago. Many argue that the only purpose of semi-automatic weapons are to kill. Why do you think semi-automatic weapons should remain legal for gun owners in the U.S.?
Well, there was a ban for about 10 years. It was called the assault weapons ban. It was introduced by President Clinton back in 1994. And when that ban expired, Congress asked for a study to be done to see just how effective it was. And that congressionally mandated study found that the ban had little to no impact on reducing homicides or other gun crimes in this country. And the reason is simple. Rifles of all sorts, not just assault-style rifles, but rifles of all sorts are used in fewer murders each year than bats, for example. More people are killed each year with a baseball bat than are killed with rifles of any sort. So the simple fact is criminals are not using assault-style weapons to commit crimes or to commit murders in the numbers that people frequently think that they are. It's handguns that are more commonly used in homicides.
But what is the purpose of a semi-automatic weapon for a person?
Sure. Well, a lot of people use them for self-defense. A lot of people like to use them for target shooting. People use them for competition. I was going to say my daughter was on the high school rifle team. That's an example of they would use rifles for marksmanship. But there's all sorts of lawful purposes that people would use a sporting rifle. And for example, the most popular one is the AR-15. And the reason that is so popular, there's about an estimated 6 million people who own sporting rifles in this country. They're so popular because they're very versatile. You can lengthen let me start that over. They're just very they're very versatile. So for example, someone like myself who might be more petite than a big guy, you can modify them so that they'll fit you better and they're easier to shoot and they're lightweight. So a lot of women like to use them for sporting, for target shooting. They're just general all-purpose rifles.
All right. Another matter of national security is the ability of a person to purchase a gun that is on the no-fly list. Why is it okay for a person on the no-fly list, a person of suspicion, a possible terrorist, able to purchase a gun?
Sure. Well, let me just say several things about the no-fly list. First of all, 98% of the people on that NICS no-fly list, 98% of the people on the federal government's no-fly list are not U.S. citizens. So right off the bat, they are prohibited from purchasing a firearm in this country. Okay, and then the 2% that are U.S. citizens, let me start over. The 2% on that list that are U.S. citizens, there are lots of problems with that list. Number one, you're not told how you get on the list. There is no way to get off the list. It's a secretive tool that law enforcement use for investigative purposes. No one on that list has been convicted of anything, so nobody should be denied a Second Amendment right. Nobody on that list should be denied their Second Amendment rights because they haven't been convicted of anything. And I think we've all seen cases of names on that list that were completely bogus. For example, Senator Ted Kennedy, before he passed away, he was on that list. South African President Nelson Mandela was on that list. There is an egregious story of a 2-year-old, a toddler, traveling with his family who was on that list.
So you don't think that there's other ways where we investigate the people more who are on the no-fly list that do want to purchase a gun?
Well, I think
and make it safer?
Well, federal law is very defined on what are the prohibiting factors from exercising your Second Amendment rights. If you're a convicted felon, or if you have been adjudicated as mentally deficient, or if you have been put into a mental facility against your will, those are the things that will prohibit you from exercising your Second Amendment rights. But being on a list that is secretly created, that investigators use to monitor suspected terrorists, is not the same thing. The courts haven't seen any evidence. A person on that list hasn't had the opportunity to speak out for themselves. Their due process has been violated. So the point is you can't be prohibited from exercising your Second Amendment right for being a suspect for something. You have to be convicted of a felony, or you have to be adjudicated as mentally ill. The federal law is very clear on that. But if you're asking the larger question of what can we do to keep Americans safer, and I think that is the real question that we want to be addressing here, is how can we keep Americans safer? Number one, we should be improving our NICS background check system. That database right now is full of holes. Let me just give you a few numbers. 38 states submit less than 80% of those felony conviction records to the federal database. That leaves about 7 million felons out there that aren't in the database. Those people should be prohibited. Okay, secondly, on mental health records, as of 2014, there were 5 states that submitted fewer than 10 records to the federal government on mental health people who would be prohibited. And there were 8 states that submitted fewer than 100 mental health records to the NICS database. So the point is there are a lot of holes in that background check system, and we need to fix those holes, tighten those holes, and ensure that those individuals who are mentally ill and who would pose a threat to themselves or others don't get access to a firearm. And then we also need to enforce existing firearms laws. We have enough of them on the books. Like I said, tens of thousands if you go from the state, local, and federal level. And under President Obama's administration, the prosecution of people who are illegally attempting to purchase a firearm, those prosecutions have dropped 40%. And in fact, I can tell you that in 2010, about 80,000 people attempted to illegally purchase a firearm. They tried to pass the NICS background check system. Out of that 80,000, only 44 were prosecuted.
So then can we have gun rights and gun safety at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. No organization in the world does more than the National Rifle Association to promote gun safety and the proper use of a firearm. We want gun owners to be responsible and safe with a firearm. We have over, let me get the exact number for you of how many firearms instructors we have. Yeah, we have over 100,000 certified firearms instructors, and more than 1 million people a year take our classes. So we're an organization that promotes gun safety, promotes responsible gun ownership, and I think that needs to be the focus of the discussion. And if there is any debate, it needs to be on how can we have people using firearms safely and responsibly. And also, I'll add one more thing, because I saw it was one of your questions about children and firearms. The state of Minnesota already has a law that if you leave a firearm in the reach of a child or in a way that they could reasonably, could get access to that firearm, you're breaking Minnesota law. And we encourage anyone who owns a gun to ensure that it is put up in a place that no one who's not supposed to have access to it can get to it.
All right. Well, I think that's it then, Catherine. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be in your story. And
thank you. Sorry, I couldn't hear you very clearly.
Oh.
So, but I hope you could hear me.
Oh, that's so weird. I could hear you perfectly. And then the audio, our photographer was just telling me that the audio was really clear. So
okay, good.